welcome to Release the Creative, your favorite show about creativity, cognition, and today, making friends with the mouse. I am Kirk Westwood.
And I'm Jeff Carpenter.
And today we want to, welcome you to episode 2, Making Friends with the Mouse, and what a ridiculous statement that is.
Well, I've heard this statement a lot, so what makes it ridiculous?
So it comes from if you've ever watched an episode of Shark Tank or The Profit, love me some Profit, actually. It's the best television show to like.
You have showed me both, yes.
Yes, no, it's great. Anytime you're talking to an entrepreneur or watching or listening to anyone from Silicon Valley, you tend to hear this phrase, if you want to build a better mousetrap, and it all comes from this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, which he did not say. Very, very important to know that the actual, I have it copied down here because it's much longer than the, and of course I've lost it. There it is. So the quote that we hear most of is, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will pound a path to your door.
That's how I know it.
That's how you know it. The real quote is, if a man has good corn or wood or boards or pigs to sell, or can make better chairs or knives, crucibles or church organs than anybody else, you will find a broad, hard-beaten road to his house, though it be in the woods.
I'm beginning to see why the other one took over.
Yeah, it's don't get me wrong, it's the exact same concept. It's if you do it better, have better, offer better, people are going to come to you. That has gotten melted down, all of the lilting prose stripped out, and now it's just, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will pound a path to your door. Now, the original Ralph Waldo Emerson quote had more meat to it. There was more to it. But now we have this programmed rallied cry, build a better mousetrap. And as overly pedantic as it might sound, we've replaced thinking through a problem with these little quippy phrases. Don't reinvent the wheel, build a better mousetrap. And today, so when I was kind of investigating creativity a few years ago, I kind of bit down on this of so many innovators and inventors and Silicon Valley people that I was interviewing. I kept hearing this phrase a lot, it's all about building the better mousetrap, and they meant it as this fun, quick, colloquial, get to the point.
Yeah.
But I really think it's damaging. It's actually doing way more harm to the innovative process than is good. But before we get into why, I want to kind of come back over here. I want to talk about the fact that words are programming. If I say pink elephant or purple zebra, a massively diverse amount of people, a majority of people, have an immediate cognitive visual response to that. They've never seen one, but they can imagine one. And that's how people react to programming. When your brain, your ears are one of the very few organs that you can't close. You can't, without your hands, you can't close you can close your mouth. If you don't you can spit something out, you can close your eyes. Your ears and your nose are just kind of at the mercy of
the world.
Your nose can at least fill up with mucus and things to kind of close the diaphragm. But no, your ears, you're pretty much just at the mercy of loud noises. Yeah. It's kind of evolutionarily unfair, but your ears take in everything and it processes it, with or without your consent. And if it's a visual cue, purple elephant, you're going to think of one. If it's an auditory cue, like run or jump or fire, you viscerally respond. Loud noises, you don't have a choice but to jump at certain loud noises. Your body just does that. That's because sounds are inadvertent, involuntary programming. Build a Better Mousetrap has fallen into this rut. Well, it's pushing us into this rut of, we have to follow this parameter, this tutorial to be innovative.
Yeah, well, I think most people say it. What they're saying is, in capitalism, you either do something better, cheaper, faster, and sometimes those other ones are difficult. So better is the one that people focus on, and they say, well, if I can be better, then it doesn't matter if I'm cheaper. And that's the dream, of course, is to come up with something that you can charge more for.
Absolutely.
So I
think doing it both, is better for less and charge more, would be the true dream.
But that's where the shorthand comes from, I think, is if you can build a better mousetrap. But so where is it leading us wrong, though?
So think about the words. And I mean, and again, words, I mean this in the most non-metaphoric sense possible, that words are programming. So build. What does it mean to build? If you think of, you have a kid and you think Bob the Builder, you think construction sites. You think, okay, I have a build a something kit. Build means to take various and disparate pieces and assemble them into one common whole. I'm going to build, and obviously there are says like, no, you can build a system on paper, and you could, yes, but the immediate mental programming for a vast majority of people is to build something.
Put it together.
You are putting it together. Better than what? That one's obvious than the previous. Okay, cool. But there's lots of difference. Better at doing what? Are we killing them? Are we collecting them? Are we safely harvesting them? Do we want more mice, less mice? Build a better mouse, better at doing what?
And the name would imply trap, implying that we want to gather and keep a lot of mice, which is probably not what people are going for.
No,
we're not collecting
we're
mice.
Not so at the very, a mousetrap, a perfect mousetrap would be a mouse deterrent. The perfect mousetrap would be to not need a mousetrap.
Yeah.
Like if you could invent a supersonic frequency that you put under your floorboards that you couldn't hear and mice hated, so mice just stayed away from your house, that is the perfect mousetrap.
But it's failed at being a trap.
But if we worked in government contracting, which you and I both have, we have failed to meet the objectives of the RFP. Like here's your, and we can't even measure it. We can't say like, well, this mousetrap, the supersonic frequency, caught a grand total of 0 mice in over a 90-day period. You're like, well, that's a failure. So in many ways, if you're looking at it from a government RFP standpoint, the perfect, well-achieving mousetrap wants to attract more mice so that it can show it's being effective.
Yeah, there was, I think in, I'm going to get this wrong, probably in India somewhere. I think when the British came into India, they had a problem with various kinds of snakes. There was a lot of snakes. And so they put out a bounty for if you bring us dead, whatever these kinds of dangerous snakes were, we will pay per snake. And this was like in the 19th century. They thought that was a great idea. We're gonna.
So people are breeding them now?
And now so people started breeding the snakes and bringing them every day. Oh, if I bring you 2 snakes every day, you'll pay for my lunch. So I will breed snakes every day. And so they ended up actually with far more snakes than originally.
So we say this thing. So, if you think about this from a government contractor, not even government, just a contract perspective. I'm looking for a contractor. I need a service. Here is my the parameters of the proposal. I have a mouse problem as defined by XYZ. You need to catch, I need to see a decline in these numbers, an increase in these numbers, and I defined it. So you're like, okay, well now you've defined it. I've now completely eliminated my ability. I've completely eliminated my complaint about we haven't defined better. But what if I can come up with a system that meets the objective without reaching any of those goals?
Yeah, your mouse deterrent sound fails at being a better mousetrap in
every possible way.
Yeah.
You have not caught a single mouse. Now you could say, well, what if there was like less food loss, less mouse sightings, less mouse droppings? Okay, so now that we're getting into going a little bit down the rabbit hole of you have to be measuring the right thing. But that's my problem with Build a Better Mousetrap, is that build, put together, better at doing what, which so many times we don't define, and then mousetrap, as you said, it implies catching mice. But that's not actually the goal of a mousetrap. I mean, unless it is in this bizarre world, most people want mice to, like, we used to have a person that worked here that was in charge of the mousetrap, and she hated taking the mousetrap out. She felt bad about it. She got one of the safe ones that she could then drive 10 miles away and let the mouse go, which is awesome. But she didn't want to trap mice. She wanted there to be no mice there for there to be needed.
Yeah.
So what if we could make friends with the mouse? And again, that's ridiculous. What if we could build a mouse fence? What if we could build a international diplomatic mouse accord that, like, what if we could build them a subset of, like, pay them protection fee? Like, we lay out cheese, but they promise to only eat the cheese we've laid out. These are insane ideas, but they all do a better job at approaching what the problem is, because Build a Better Mousetrap prescribes the solution, and it tells you to do that solution better.
In a very real world sense, my mouse solution at home is I own 3 cats, which I did not build them. They're not better. I have to feed them.
That's true.
And they actually don't trap the mice. The mice smell them and don't show up at all.
Right.
So, and also, I don't have a mouse problem at home. I have 3 cats. But
I'd forgotten you got a third cat. Yeah.
in Build a Better Mousetrap, the cats fail at every single word.
Every single one of them.
And if cat was a new thing, it was a new concept that people didn't know about, no one would have thought to bring a cat into the house.
And on that actual thing, I was just teaching my daughters last night about. I'm super not going down the rabbit hole with this, but I was teaching them about the Inquisitions and the witch trials and the
Right.
Not Salem, not in America, but specifically in Europe, and about how the witches, super air quotes on the witches, these alchemist women often had cats, which is where the cat association with women, and they did so because they understood that mice carried disease and they had cats, and so they didn't get sick and mice didn't come to their house, and so they were witches because clearly they were hexing the mice. Like that was the solution. That was clearly what was going on. This phrase "build a better mousetrap" prescribes a solution and sets a baseline that doesn't approach an understanding of the problem or even the problem at all. It isn't. Emerson did not say, well, sorry, Emerson, I don't want to throw him under the bus. His quote was far better. But the phrase "build a better mousetrap," it doesn't say if you can find a better way to get rid of mice, or if you can find a way to keep mice out of people's houses. That still prescribes a solution, for the record. So I'm not actually saying that's what it should be, but if you can solve people's mouse problem, now we have to ask what the problem is. Now we have to go into what does that mean? Whereas the phrase "build a better mousetrap" is programming that immediately, if I say to my kid, my son, or any of my daughters, I have 4 daughters and a son. If I said to any of them, hey, I need you to build me a insert anything, they will have perler beads and Legos on the floor in under a minute. Because build means something to our brains.
Yeah, to go back to your government RFP, sometimes subcontracting is the right answer. And buying a better mousetrap was not in the phrase, but that might actually be what the right answer is.
Find a mousetrap builder that is better at this than you. Find someone with a better understanding of the problem. But notice, build a better mousetrap. Nowhere in that colloquial phrase does it say what the problem is. Because we're just like, oh, come on, Kirk, you're being pedantic. Everyone knows what the problem is. In this case, yes. But let's take it one step removed. If I tell you to take out the trash, if I say to one of my kids, hey, take out the trash, and I come in a minute later, and the trash is out of the can and on the floor, they have achieved the objective as described. They're also grounded. But they've done the task. But there's 15 subtasks that are implied. And I will tell you, as someone who's lived in Germany and Saudi Arabia and Korea and France, the phrase "take out the trash" is not universal.
Well, as my daughter said the other day when I asked her to take out the trash, "You want me to assassinate it?" And
I love
she's being clever, but that is proving your point.
It's these turns of phrases and these colloquial little fun things. You know, back when I was in government contracting, we all had to take turns taking out the trash, and it literally wasn't. There was a 15-step thing of take it out, take it downstairs. You had to also take out the recycling. You had to replace both bags. You had to move a thing to let people know that it was a 15-step process, but the request was take out the trash. And yes, we need to boil things down to single lines. The problem is when we build these systems with subsystems, contracting with subcontracting, with super subcontracting, that doesn't somewhat constantly readdress those nested systems. And the part of it that I get the most offended by, the most wrapped up in, is we use words that we consider to be universal. We use words that to us and our upbringing, like, well, it's human nature. If anyone ever uses the term "it's human nature," almost always they're wrong. They mean it's my upbringing. Yeah.
Other than food and sleep are good. That's about it.
Food, sleep, and sex are just about the only 3 things you can count on being animal natured. Like, those 3 things will be sought out by any sentient being in some form. And as we've proven with all sorts of different personality and lifestyle, and even those aren't always concrete and in their definitions for people, but they will be, human relationships, food, rest, shelter, safety. And so we use these words with what we consider, and you hear it all the time, well, common sense isn't common. You're right. And it's not because people are stupid. It's because there is a near infinite number of different dialects within English. And we assume that people are saying the same things and they're talking straight past each other, which gets marketing really fun because now we have to sell to people that all are speaking different languages. But that's a different conversation.
Yeah. So tell me about, you have said a couple of times now, language is, and speaking is programming. And
Sure.
I think that's a thing that kind of sort of makes sense, but
Sure.
It's a little confusing.
Okay, so this is not a show on hypnosis, and I am not a hypnotist. I've never taken a class on hypnosis. I was hypnotized once. It was an interesting experience, but that is for a different show. And no, it wasn't a stage like hypnotist thing. It was a different But if you just take this from the most top level, I don't want people to get wrapped up in the concept of hypnotism or what did Kirk say. I just mean in the concept of the post-hypnotic suggestion, the implanting a Pavlovian response, a triggered response.
Right.
I was 19 years old and I was sitting in this class, and this is the one I use because it's straight fun, but it shows how powerful this can be if you know what you're doing or if you're just joking around. I'm 19 years old and I'm sitting in this class, and it's kind of a study hall situation. We're all joking around and we're like supposed to be reading and doing our homeworky stuff, but we're all just joking around. And all of a sudden the room just kind of falls silence. You know how that happens sometimes where you're just all talking and then all of a sudden there's just this long beat and there's several seconds of just pin drop silence in this room of probably 12, 19 to 20-year-old boys. And suddenly, and two girls. And suddenly one of my classmates goes, Abraham Lincoln. And all of us look up and like, what? And he goes, Abraham Lincoln. We're like, Arthur, what? And he goes, Abraham Lincoln a third time. We're like, what are you talking about? He's like, because when the room falls silent, everyone automatically thinks of Abraham Lincoln. And all of us look at him like he's insane. He's like, Abraham Lincoln. We're like, what are you? Stop saying that. He's like, when the room falls silent, people think of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln. He goes, Arthur, no one thinks of Abraham Lincoln when the room falls silent. He goes, really? You will now.
You told me this story 20 years ago, and it has stuck in my head.
And I will tell you that it is 20 years. I'm 38 years old. I was 19 then. It was literally 19 pushing 20 years ago, and it still happens to me. And so then about a decade ago, I was a substitute teacher, just because I had some extra time and lots of days off from my normal job. So I picked up substitute teaching, and just for my English classes and some of the theater classes, I did that. I did this whole thing when the room would fall silent. I would do Abraham Lincoln. And to this day, the people that have kept my email address or that I'm still friends with social media on, I get these like, you're a jerk. I still think Abraham Lincoln half the time the room falls quiet. And it's such like an innocuous joke. And he was being funny, but it worked. And the thing is that marketers do that all the time. They embed, it's called a word anchor. They find a way to do something repetitive and interesting to associate an action with a word, and they can slam them together. And if they do it correctly, to this day, right now, I can sing the entire Alka-Seltzer song that hasn't played since 87. I checked. Like, because these word associations, your brain is just running programming, just like any other processing engine. And so we have to be aware that sometimes people will say things to us that trigger us. And I mean that for the good and the bad. That set us down a line of code in a very non-metaphorical way.
You've talked to me a lot about how certain marketing geniuses have managed to co-opt real world phrases that they didn't invent.
Yeah.
And the other one that comes to mind for me the most is you've always talked about Geico's phrase, I've got good news, and how that's a real thing that people say in real life.
Absolutely.
And how now most of America will think about, I just saved a bunch of money on my car insurance if you say, I've got good news.
If you are over the age of like 23, 24, I was at a Mac store a while back, a decade ago. I was at a Mac store and I brought in my computer that was broken, and I came in and I was like, I have AppleCare. And he's like, I don't see it. And I was like, I swear I have AppleCare. And he's like, no, sir. I'm like, I have AppleCare. And he goes in the back and he's like, and he's gone for like 10 minutes. And he comes back out and he's like, hey, so I've got good news. And it has nothing to do with your car insurance. And I'm like, I'm in an Apple store. We're not talking about my car. And he just said that loudly to a room to me. But like, Geico needs to send this man a check. They hug their marketing dude that figured out, they co-opted a phrase, I've got good news. Another good one is give me a break. They didn't do quite as good a job, but Kit Kat bars with the give me a break, it's very like, it rings with you.
You think about it, yeah.
It's just word anchors. Now, this all comes back to creativity, because when this is the rut that we get in, we get caught into this, give me a break. We get caught into this, I've got good news. We got caught into this, build a better mousetrap. We get caught into these tutorial, and not to, this is another episode entirely, but our education system is tutorialized. We start a line of code and this is how you solve the problem, step A, step B, step C. The problem is, so if I tell you to, hey, we need to solve, Anderson, I need you to do these things by the end of the day, just like take out the trash, just like build a better mousetrap. There's almost always a semi-complex line of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H that is intended. We have a system here. It has worked over 25 years. We are a well-polished machine. Don't reinvent the wheel. Just do the systems A through Z. And that is stupid.
Well, it's the, what is it? If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's kind of you're talking about programming with words, saying build a better mousetrap, but some of this is baked into us. I'm a visual communicator. If someone says we need to do X, my first thought is, well, what sort of a video can I make?
Right.
And you're the one who always is telling me that, well, the video might not be the right solution here. Right. It often is, but not always. And so that's kind of where you jump in, is like, no, Jeff, we might have other tools in our kit.
Well, and I mean, my favorite, we're a video production company. So obviously video is the number one thing that people, when people call us, they have already self-prescribed.
Yeah.
I read on the internet that video is killing it. TikTok is crushing it. Maybe not for much longer, but like I read that video is it. So I'm going to call these guys. They're going to help. And the number of times that I talk someone out of a video initially,
truly frustrating, but
I can't imagine.
We don't want to make a video that's not going to be effective.
No, and I was like, hey, so I want to make a video for you, but you know what? We should probably start in this other place, because you have gone down the tutorial rabbit hole. You have gone down the I read online by this one influencer that this is what I need to do. And he was talking, or she was talking in a general sense, your situation's a little different. And so, we get caught into these post-hypnotic suggestions. And I'm not implying that marketers are out hypnotizing us. And I'm just saying that we get these anchors and these Pavlovian triggers. But I had an opportunity last year to talk to Carmen Simon. She is a cognitive neuroscientist. She wrote a book called Impossible to Ignore, which was really serendipitous because our slogan is don't be ignored. And those happened almost the same year and without knowledge of each other. And so I read her book, and when I was writing mine, I reached out to her, and she was gracious enough to jump on a call with me. And I pitched her this whole thing about building a better mousetrap. And I was talking to her about how my book, which was originally called Build a Better Mousetrap, or Make Friends with the Mouse, about how, why don't we build a mouse fence? Why don't we build a mouse house? Why don't we build an international mouse accord? Why can't we make friends with the mouse? And she laughed because it's ridiculous and it's meant to be. And she said, let me ask you a question, Kirk. Are you as creative as the strength of your memories? And unlike a lot of phrases you hear over and over and over again, so much so that they become programming, I'd never heard that particular set of phrases before, so I had to stop and think about what that could possibly mean.
Yeah, say that again slower.
Are you as creative as the strength of your memories? And I stopped her. I was like, you're going to have to explain, because I know what all those words mean, but you have now managed to give me programming that I can't run in the background. And she said, everything you just said, mouse fence, supersonic frequency, diplomatic mouse accord, you didn't create any of those. Those are all memories. You've seen a fence before. You understand how they work.
Right.
You know what a dog whistle is. You know that dogs are agitated or rallied by sound. You know of those things. You have seen these things. You have collected these. You are familiar with the UN and the international accords. None of those things did you just create anything new. What you did was apply a misaligned memory out of context where you knew it didn't fit to see if it would work. You took a round peg and you forced it into a square hole to see, was there one that you could make fit? And I'm like, That's true.
This also hits on in the world of improv performing.
Yeah.
That's a huge shortcut towards building a scene and making your character more realistic, is to just have access to really deep details about things. If you walk in and to like you're doing an improv scene and you're like, well, hello, sir, we're at a grocery store. That's pretty flat. But if you come in and say like, paste picante salsa, I thought they stopped making this in 1978. And you're like, oh, no, they brought it back in the newer, bolder flavor after that. And like, wow, I totally missed that. And, just those sorts of details
now
really.
People can understand you're in a grocery store without you having to say it.
Yeah. And it just makes everything more real. And so it's a shortcut in improv. It doesn't really have a relation to the real world, but that's kind of where creativity comes from, is bouncing from A to B to C and then jumping right to G.
Right. And so what the funny thing here is that my prescription is in contrast to the problem. The prescription is we are using shorthand incorrectly, and we're using shorthand, which is cutting out it, which is tutorializing solutions. We are cutting out the solution by we're cutting out understanding of the problem by tutorializing a solution. And my prescription for that is you should understand lots of other solutions and put them in instead.
Yeah.
And I had an opportunity to talk last year again with the program managers, project manager, PMP conference. And all these people, they are project manager professionals, PMP. They deal with, some of them have been doing it for 30 years, and they have done projects from hundreds of thousands to hundreds of millions of dollars. And one of the things I got talking to them about was they understand the project really well, but they understand every step. They've been doing it 100 times. Everything is lather, rinse, repeat. But they don't understand the problems really well, because those are the things that happen outside of the purview, that happen in the negative spaces. And innovation and efficiencies are found in the negative spaces. And if you walk the same path every single time, it's safer, but it is not necessarily always faster or better or cheaper. And then we throw in other programming like, well, build a better mousetrap. And so we're like, okay, I have this process. I need to build a new system that will shorten the process. Or maybe we should throw the process away. Maybe the end isn't the right goal, but all of our programming, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't build a better mousetrap. All of our programming, follow the system. Don't, stay in your lane. Every little bit of institutional and instructional understanding we have, just follow the steps. Just do what you're told. Stay within your lane. Everything we're told says don't understand the negative space, just do the system. And that is insidious towards creativity.
So to take this into the real world for our viewers, something I do in the video world is a client will come to me and say, we need a video that's XYZ, does this, it has to have a purple dinosaur in it. I always start a meeting. I always say, okay, back up. Who is going to watch this?
Right.
And we always back up to that point. And sometimes the client has gotten excited and skipped that. They're like, oh yeah, we figured all that out, and here, let me tell you. But most of the time, they haven't even thought of it actually. And by me asking it, it causes them to back up and say, oh, who is going to watch this? And that leads to different conclusions than they had done. So is that, would you say that's a good example of what you're talking about?
Yes. I mean, the number of times I'll get to talking to people and I'll say that exact thing, like, okay, we're going to be doing this campaign. Who's your client? Who's your audience? And they won't know, or they'll say they know. And I'm like, okay, why do you think that's your client? And they're like, well, that's who comes into the store. It's like, does that mean that's the best person to be communicating with? They're like, well, that's who we see the most of. And I was like, so is that showing the audience you are hitting, or the audience you could be? Does that show who needs your services, or just the only ones who know about them? Like, we build all these assumptions, and they're largely incorrect. And so, yes, that's a very good example.
So what could someone do in any field if your boss has come in and said, we need you to do X, and you think, oh, great, Y does X? Like, should you write it down on a piece of paper or sit there and think about it? Like, what's a good way to shortcut your own brain to say, what's the step before X that, what's kind of generic advice for anyone in any field?
Man, I have such a good answer for this. I'm going to try to say it fast because I don't want us to go super overline. If I found out there was a guy giving away free Porsches, or that I could get a good deal on a Porsche, but I live in I have a house with a dirt lot next to it and no
garage.
No garage. Well, I can't afford a Porsche, and no one's going to give me a Porsche. That's just not going to happen. But if I took a rake and I went and I cleared out the dirt lot, when I showed him that I had prepared with the dirt lot, that's good. And the next week, if I could go out and get some rocks or some logs and make like a parking, like a kind of a cleared area, or if I could get a tent, or if I could, incremental innovation. If I could make a place, build, show the parameters, show that my idea isn't insane. Like, I know that you don't see that I have a garage, because I don't, but look, I have a space for it. So many times we take to our boss this crazy idea, and they, just like us, they are working in programming. They look at your house. Thompson, I'm not giving you a Porsche. You don't even have a garage. You need to help them see it. You need to show them the garage. So if you're coming to your boss and you're saying, hey, I know we do steps A through K, but check this out. Show them a way as clearly as you can so that because you, as much pushback as you're getting, they're fighting their programming just like you're fighting yours. Help them. Show them that you cleared the space for the garage. Help them see, because so many times I've heard people say, we don't have the money for this year. Let's do it next year. Okay, but for everything you can think of, everything, there's 10 steps before that one that are free. Do them so that when the 10th step happens, there's a place to park the car. Mm-hmm. Creativity comes from misaligned memories, but when you raise your hand in a board meeting and say, I have an idea, what if we throw out the system? Everyone's going to react to that very negatively with varying degrees of visceral anger. So the idea is that to show creativity, you need to express in a way that they can understand, even if it looks crazy, where the car would be parked. We're going to get a Porsche next year. We don't even have a garage. I've already thought of that. Here's where it's going to go. And that's a terrible example, but it's the best way that I can think of do everything you can to show the negative space. Do everything you can to draw attention to the way through the trees, because otherwise, you're right. It's just, it's fighting too many levels of programming.
Very interesting stuff. So we will be back next week. And this is Release the Creative. I'm Jeff.
I'm Kirk.
And we'll see you later.
Bye.